Got it.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this month's webinar, A Literal Scroll Through the CLC, sponsored by the North American Cambridge Classics Project and sponsored by Cambridge University Press. Jenny and I would like to welcome two longtime presenters this evening, Nora Kelley and S.K. Smith. They have done a number of webinars for us in the past. They've also been frequent presenters at our summer workshops, and we're just so delighted to have them with us this evening. Nora has taught all levels of Latin, including AP and IB. She teaches at Washington Lee High School in Arlington, Virginia. And SK teaches at the Dalton School in New York. And in addition to Latin, she's also taught English, philosophy, and Greek. And I know they've got a wonderful presentation coming up this evening, and we hope that you will interact with them. Please ask them questions that you may have. We are recording this session, and if you need a certificate for this evening's presentation, if you will just email us training@cambridgelatin.org, we'll get a certificate out to you very quickly, and we will remind you of that at the end.
Yes, it is.
So on that note, Nora and SK.
I don't even remember what this presentation's about. I'll just sign up for them whenever they happen. You're gonna move to the couch? Sure.
All
right, Nora, you ready?
Sure, I'm ready.
Nora, I need the first slide to be the title, so I have it.
Isn't that it? I thought that was it. Oh, wait. Uh-oh.
Just go back one.
That's weird. Okay, 1 second. There's going to be a lot of, there we go.
It's called A Literal Scroll Through the Cambridge Series. So this is the series of books I use with my students.
I'm gonna mute everybody.
I think someone might be
Oh,
unmuted.
No, just you go ahead.
Okay. All right, there we go. So news about upcoming webinars. Of course, you can go to cambridgelatin.org. And then here we go.
Nora, do you want to walk everyone through why Virgil's on our title screen?
Oh, only because when we were thinking of this idea, it just made me think of the whole Dante's Inferno and Virgil leading Dante through. And so we thought we would have Virgil be our guide too. So he's going to show up on a lot of the slides.
And when Nora and I were talking about this webinar, we were thinking about when do you use authentic Latin in the classroom, and how do you use it, and whom should you use it with? And we try to use it with our students from the very beginning, and we're going to show you examples of what that looks like. And our teacher's manual has this fantastic quote: Latin is intrinsically interesting to anyone who likes people, ideas, words, the past, or studying the way society works. And I really think it's a lovely way to ground what we're going to be doing today.
And it kind of covers all the bases, right? Like who's not in that group? Right, let me go forward. So I did this add-on. So I want to see if it works. So it's just a word cloud. So if I do this, it's going to be slow.
But there should be a QR code that shows up in the center. So if you want to do it on your phone.
Go full screen again.
And if you don't want to do it on your phone, you can just type in livepolls.app/41KTS6. So either way.
It's an add-on actually for Google Slides that I thought looked really cool. But of course, my county doesn't allow it. So I did it on my personal, personal email, but I wish I could get it for school.
So I'm going to do mine now.
Okay.
We did it earlier. Those are our words.
Yeah, we practiced already.
Mea culpa, I put it in.
I think you can you enter twice? That's what I'm sort of curious about. Like if people
No, I don't think I can. I think I'm already in.
So he's calidus, he's clever, he's mirabile. Well, his works are mirabile. He could be, well, he's subtilis. Yes, I agree. He's doctus.
I think you can only submit once, Katie.
Okay. Bummer. All right, that's interesting to learn. Oh, intelligens with a macron. Or as one of my students used to say, a macron. Okay, and now I have to figure out, how do I get back to the present?
Hit escape.
You think? Okay, thanks. I like escape. Oh, it didn't let me escape.
Just hit the X on the top and move over the tab on the left.
I hate to
There's
say
that too.
I can't see the X. I knew this would happen.
So if you minimize your screen for a moment,
Ah, oh dear. And that's not, oh, okay. Yeah, there'll be a bit of this, but it's nostalgia for that COVID year. Okay. Like I get to go back there without the discomfort. Okay, thanks. There.
so another little quote from our teacher's manual, which you'll be hearing from a lot. So the Cambridge Latin course's stories are written with the intention of recreating the Roman viewpoint of much of the authentic Latin literature. And one of the things I think it's really important to remember is that these stories, and we've got a link to all of the unadapted references at the end of the slideshow that you'll have access to. They are rooted in so many wonderful Latin authors, and you just can't get enough of all of the stories and how they connect to Caesar and Tacitus and Virgil and Pliny and Ovid and Catullus, and of course Plautus.
And if you're a creative out of the box thinker, you can extend it, I think, even further, right? Like and I think we've tried to do a bit of that. But every time I look at that document, I always find something new, like, oh, I didn't realize that. So it's really quite valuable. Okay, I'm going to put in a plug for Latin via Proverbs. I don't know if people have seen, I just love this book. And Laura Gibbs has this wealth of materials to support, but one of the things I love about this is you can start right at the beginning, right? Here's an early group of them, and it's basically all about est. And so I highlighted a few of the things that, that kind of jumped out at me. I feel like this is the sort of thing you could write one on the board. You could give, pairs of students one to work with. But in looking at, like, for example, 179, fames optimus est coquus, you've got that predicate nominative setup that if you do the NLE, they are going to need to be familiar with that. And they love reading, like, oh, it's real Latin. But the thing that I liked about this was that in the first one, you've got the est. And, they might not know fames, but you can help them figure it out. Hey, famished comes from that, famine. And then optimus and coquus, they really will know by stage 3 of Cambridge. So those words should look familiar. And then they will feel like, oh, we know those words, and we're reading real Latin. But the second one has it without the est. And so here, right in the beginning, they get an experience with ellipsis, which we use in our everyday speech, and it doesn't have to be scary. So you can start building those literary devices, poetic devices right from the beginning to help them get where they need to be by AP or IB. IB does a lot of it. And it's fun. It's what makes reading the Latin fun. So, there were a few others that I thought would, that would jump out, and they might have an interesting time talking about amor caecus est. That's a phrase that people still use today. And then my favorite on this one is optimum medicamentum quies. But it gets them used to not seeing that est and putting it there.
And you don't even have to use the word ellipsis. You can just practice it, and the students get familiar with that sentence pattern structure. And Cambridge is really good about introducing sentence pattern structures. So this is another way that you can talk about those kinds of things. And
you can talk about, like you had a good example, Smith, earlier, of everyday use. Like we use it all the time in speech.
So Smith is here.
Yes.
Nora too.
There you go. And then they can start to recognize that at lunch. And then I put in another one only because I was sort of thinking of the NLE, because we recently did it. And sometimes there are things that are on a level of the NLE that they haven't had in Cambridge yet. And for one of my levels, one of them was FIO. And so this is just a nice way to get them used to that word in a creative way that, that has them reading Latin, and that isn't some sort of like rote let's go through the paradigm. And again, this is the predicate nominative thing for the higher levels, or not just the est. So, and it's got that wonderful by puto deus fio, and then you can talk about Vespasian and tie it into history, because there are always students who are really into that as well. So this book is awesome. They're grouped by all sorts of different language sense units, and so for anything you're working on in ablative absolute, you can find something in Latin bioproverbs.
Before you move on, I just wanted to point out that what you didn't highlight on the other side of the page is a really lovely pairing when you're introducing complementary infinitives with kids.
Oh,
because you've got all those potest kinds of things. So they see the complement in the infinitive, and that's really nice. And they can practice those.
and super cool to use with stage 13.
So the next set of slides, next 4 slides, are an overview of how you can use unadapted Latin units 1 through 4. So from the very first day, you can pull up Caecilius's head, and you can talk about, I wouldn't show what's underneath his head until much later because it's rather naughty, but you can talk about in the teacher's manual what it says, the graffito. So he who loves should live, he who knows not how to love should die. And you've got, wonderful connections that you can show the kids from day 1. This is a real fellow. This is in the house. Margaret Ann can talk to you so much about the house of Caecilius and the different kinds of things that are that should not have been posted graffito wise, but you can return to this. For example, you've got Caecilio Jucundo ab sexto metello. When you reach stage 9, you can say, okay, we talked about this at the very first day of school, and now we're in stage 9, and you're learning about the dative, and let's put this into practice. And you can really read real Latin right here. So nice and easy. And that's right out of the teacher's manual. Make use of the teacher's manual, so much good stuff inside it. For unit 2 on the next slide, again, another reference from the teacher's manual if you want background about Salvius and Rufila. There's a funerary inscription about Rufila that you can have the kids, you can introduce it to them as soon as they're introduced in the Blue Book. If you want to move beyond, as an extension project for Cambridge, you can do the Ashmolean Latin inscription project. And if you'll just click on that for a moment,
Yep.
I think what's nice is there are a host of wonderful lesson plans. They've got stuff on imperatives. You can play an imperative game. So they've got teacher guide and they've got a student worksheet. And if you scroll down, there's all sorts of really nice things. And they've got objects with real Latin on them. And they connect it back to the museum, to the Ashmolean Museum, Oxford. And if you, for example, I linked up the Ashmolean inscription project to when imperatives are introduced, you get all these wonderful bits about Galatea giving orders to everybody, bossing everyone around, and the kids can boss each other around. And if any of you have ever seen English classes do Shakespearean insults, it's very much a similar activity. So if you want to go back, I just included a little passage from Unit 2 so you can see the use of imperatives. So if you're just thinking about ways that you can connect how the language is functioning, in addition to the stories. In Unit 3, there are so many opportunities to look at inscriptions. And to me, this is one of the most beautiful things that you can show kids that's so accessible, whether you choose to go on a field trip to a museum or you're choosing to take your students to another country, and they will be so excited. Let's say you want to go to Roman Bath and there's the curse tablet. There will be a curse tablet, but you can teach kids what I often refer to as Roman texting. So diem, like dis manibus, and they'll see it. They'll see it for me, if I take kids to the Metropolitan Museum in New York, diem is in so many things. When I took kids to Vienna, we would go to a Roman museum in Vienna. And they were so proud of themselves because they had practiced how to read based on all of the ways that Cambridge had trained them how to read. So you can start from the very beginning of Unit 3, you can practice in stage 28. There's more practice at the end of the book. So lots of wonderful ways for students to see how real, authentic, unadapted Latin connects to their readings in their stories. And then the last.
And I was just going to add too, and it also addresses a real potential for embarrassment for Latin teachers as well, because people will constantly ask you like, what does that inscription mean? And it can be very hard if you don't know the little, you know, DM and all of that. So it's nice for students to have that and be able to, when they are traveling, say, oh, it's this.
And they're the experts. And then this is same thing. So out of the teacher's manual, you have even more wonderful little nuggets or Easter eggs at the very end. In Unit 4, I think this is in stage 38, where the vocabulary is pasted. There's this lovely little picture at the bottom of the vocabulary page. Don't skip over those opportunities to look at the images, because you get all sorts of unadapted Latin right inside the text. And so this teacher's manual explanation about this picture gives you a little bit more wonderful superlatives with fidentissimi, amentissimi, pietissimi, and you can have students as an extension activity at the end of, if you want, Unit 12 or stage 12, or at the end of stage 40, or whenever somebody dies, you can have them practice writing their own inscriptions, and they love it. And it's wonderful to decorate classrooms or hallways with characters whom they're mourning. Okay, there's some wonderful pieces to look at here. So this is Catullus. I chose 2 different poems. So when you get to stage 5 and you're reading you start to do the play with papaya. And at the very end, you get Salve mea columba, deliciae mei, straight out of Catullus, and the kids have no idea. So you point it out to them. If you click on the Bombyx Press Catullus 2, Nora, you can see an adapted, a prose version. And these are things that the kids, you introduce them to early on. If you scroll down, she's given you basically an easier version of Catullus 2. And by the time your students in a couple of years reach Catullus, they'll say, oh, right, I remember all of this. And so you have laid the foundation for authentic Latin by giving these adapted pieces as we go through. So you get vocabulary straight from Catullus, and Rachel Cunning's really good about highlighting all of these wonderful things that Catullus has done. I love doing this with students because I think the students get excited about reading real Latin authors. And it's no different than when a friend of mine who's a big comic book fan loved reading adapted stories of like Beowulf, for example, or Shakespeare in comic book form. And so give students that leg up, that tiered version before they move on. And then the other, if you go back to the slideshow, on the right, I just took a screenshot from Ego Polyphemus. Andrew,
sorry, should I go back?
No, that's fine. You can totally go down. This is wonderful. I have my students sing along with this because I think it's super fun, and they like to beat their fists on the table as the singers are singing. So let's go ahead.
Play a tad?
Yeah, let's hear a little. It's quite wonderful. So this is Catullus 5.
Let me know if it's too loud.
The more you, so it's kind of coming in and out a little, but the more you listen to the meter of poetry, the more it becomes ingrained in students, and do it early on so that students can hear how Catullus sounds. And then meter is not so scary anymore. It's no different than when kids hear nursery rhymes. And if you go back, the Andrew Olympi novella, he's basically taken Catullus 5 and inserted his own little rendition. First line, he's changed lesbia to femina, and then he's got the last bit, and that's totally accessible for beginning readers. And you can make a lovely connection between stage 5 papaya and grumio and the Catullus poetry. Oh yeah, thank you, Katie. Cunning's teacher's manual is really super helpful. So if you're interested in doing Latin novellas or any of her work through Bombax Press, just type it in and you'll get emails on a routine basis from her. The other thing that I wanted to point out is the Ancient Graffiti Project. So if you're not familiar with it, they've got all of the inscriptions in Pompeii and Herculaneum coded. Almost all of them, I think, are student friendly. And I just pulled this one up because it's got a nice connection both to stage 8 when our students learn about gladiators, and you can walk them through what Suspirium Puellarum is. And by the time they get to stage 22, they will have seen all sorts of, they'll seen examples of what a heartthrob is, either out in the gladiatorial fights, or Modestus, who thinks he's a heartthrob, or tries to convince other people that he is. And so the kids are always proud. They're like, oh, I remember that word. And they remember it because they've seen the authentic Latin connection. The Ancient Graffiti Project is great. They also have a lot of teacher resources. So please make use of all of them. If you want to just do a quick opening of the link.
Should I open it? Okay.
Yeah. Just so they can see it. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it. You can start with the Ancient Graffiti Project day 1 in Latin with students. When I listened to an ACL talk, I think a couple of summers ago, they talked about how people used to say sol and wa as shorthand for solway and wale. So like it's too much to say solway, right? So it's just sol, wa. Shorten it down to a monosyllable. So they've got wonderful activities here.
That's cool. Right, I'm gonna try to save some tabs here. Okie doke.
So units 3 and 4, I also do, you can do these as story starters or ways that you might put a quote, you project a quote for students and you say, keep this in the back of your mind, you read through a story and then you unpack that quote. And sometimes I just let it sit with them. Quod sum eris, right? I don't say anything else. We read Bulimicus Rex, and then we talk about what the heck does this mean? That which I am, you will be, and how might you connect that to what happens to Bulimicus? And you've got a number of others, the Falernian wine, which surfaces frequently in the Cambridge stories and definitely in Petronius. And you've got some maxims and the connection between love and clear-headed, or love and friendship and loyalty and things like that with stage 40 and Salvius, and who sticks with him and who ditches him very quickly. Again, from the teacher's manual, at the very end of every stage, you'll see phrases for discussion, and you can treat them exactly the same way. So I just pulled this from stage 14. You can use it for stage 14. You can use it for just about anything. I actually have used some of these phrases that they have at the bottom of stage 14 to go back and look at stage 13. So with conioratio, is it sweet and proper to die for one's country? So you've got a host of things that you can take a look at and unpack, and they're all unadapted Latin. Of course, the Dulciet decorum est is the little piece also that shows up in a lot of English classrooms as well when they're reading poetry.
Okay. And now we come to stage 7, which is such a wonderful stage with that whole ghost story and everything. And so sometimes I like to add in tiered readings, and they're actually quite easy to write. I think we have a link below. No, it's on another slide.
Yeah, it shows up.
Yeah. So here's one that I just did super quickly of one of the parts that I really like from book 6 of the Aeneid when he's in the underworld. And I feel as if students at stage 7, maybe doing it as a class, as a choral reading, could easily figure this out, right? Aeneas et Sibyl, ebant per umbram, they've seen umbra, per domos wakawas, they can figure out what a domos is, wakawa is kind of obvious. And even though they haven't had the genitive, they could figure out regna plutonis. Then they're going through the lucem malignum, and they will know the word malignant. There's a via in Silva, that's right out of the story, the ghost story. That's already the werewolf one. And then nox atra ubique est, and here's a nice chance to talk about the color atra. They can tie it into its etymology coming from atrium, and how the original atrium was just a round hut and the walls were black with soot, and that's why the Temple of Vesta is shaped like that. And for me, like a lot of students, they will write an IA for IB, I teach IB, and that's a research document on following a question. And sometimes something early on like this will stick with them. I have a student right now who's very interested in the lares, and 3 or 4 years later, that ends up being their IA. They've been thinking about it. But it's really fun because in the beginning, right, in the faucibus, and we've already had the rooms of the house, so you can talk about that, the fauces, and cubicula they will have had. And now we get into, well, first you get into the personified evils like morbus and senectus. And you can kind of help them figure out those. But the part that I like is when they're going past the centauri, these little stables, and the centaurs are stabled, because after they die, they got to go somewhere. And you can tie this back to Hercules and that whole, the thing with, Clara, the Pictrix. And they may not know about the Battle of the Centaurs and the Lapiths, but they will know some of these other things. So one kid will know Briareus without fail, and more will know the Chimera and the Gorgons and the Harpies. And then this one is my favorite because it's the forma tricorporis umbrae, and they can figure that out and realize, wait, what ghost, what shade has 3 bodies? And tie that to the Geryon story. So it's also a really nice way to tie in those kids who are really into mythology and know it. So it's fun to do that sort of thing and plonk it right in there and hopefully get them interested in, like, I've read the Aeneid, a little bit fixed, but I'm looking forward to reading it in a few years from now. It's kind of a nice carrot.
Nora,
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I really like the idea of doing a choral reading with this and how easy it would be to dramatize particular words, right?
Oh,
like you could really easily dramatize senectus, timor, fames.
Yes. Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah.
And we have several links to the Project Archaea. Should I wait until we get into the Caesar before I go there? But if you're not familiar with it, these are tiered readings for the whole AP syllabus. And so it's a really easy place to go to if you don't want to write the tiered readings yourself.
I think you can show it if you want.
We'll see when we go later. Let's try later because I know it shows up later. And we have all these links. We put them at the very end of the presentation, so people should be able to access them. All right, now we're going to try the Jamboard.
Okay, so do you want to click on the Jamboard?
Is that what I do? Okay.
And then if you'll copy and paste the link into the chat for everyone, and it should be open. And there are 4 different slides. So what you're going to do is you're going to see quotes, 1 quote on each slide of the Jamboard. And what we'd like for you to do is, if you would you hover your mouse over on the left side? There's a pen and an eraser and an arrow, and then the 4th one down is a sticky note. So you can, if you want, you can do a sticky note, or if you want to go second from the bottom, that's a little text box. Just type in some possible stories that you might connect to these quotes. So, and I guess what we're trying to get at is, if we put this quote up on the board, what might you think of? Bibamus moriendum est. What's the first story that you might think to link to this? And would you just go through each of the slides? So in the top middle.
Yes, stage 1 meeting Quintus.
And then forsanit haec meminissa iuvabit, and then panamit cercenses, and uxor me excruciat cur quia vivit. So it's misogynistic, but you could switch it around too.
Yeah, I thought of the dinner party also.
So feel free to, oh, sorry, go ahead. Didn't mean to.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Feel free to post on any one of the 4 slides.
Should we, I don't know, should we time it? Should we give it like 30 seconds and then zip through or something?
Yeah, 30 seconds sounds great.
It'll probably take me 30 seconds to get my timer up, so.
And then once we have everything posted, you can go back and use this as a brainstorm for yourself. Like, okay, I need some hook to get my kids into this story. What might I do? And this quote might be it. Do you want to look at 2, 3, or 4 to see if anybody has posted?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep going. All right, let's see.
Ah,
Okay.
yeah, that's exactly right.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That's
with
right.
this quote.
Romeo.
But also don't forget volubilis.
That's right.
Yes, Rapilla. But it
And I-
could also be Domitia, right?
Yep, exactly. And it could also be stage 40 when she leaves him.
Yeah, she should have.
I love that.
All right, very good. So Jamboards is fun. Should
Yeah,
I
if-
say here? Go. Yeah, we should.
Yeah, we can move on. If you haven't done Jamboard, it's a nice, easy, low stress way for students to engage.
All right. And actually right now in IB, we're reading this passage, the Aulus Gellius Androclus, and I love it. So we have several examples of it, but Justin Slocum Bailey does this wonderful retelling of it verbally, and we'll listen to it for just a minute, but he's so engaging. And so students really, you know, it's nice for them to see a different face and kind of hear about the story. You get a little bit more detail of it than is in the Cambridge story. Sorry, Justin, it's frozen at this.
My students are rapt when they listen to him retell
Yeah,
them.
that and Magistercraft.
Mhm.
Okay.
Salvete, rogatus sum a discipulis Lycei nomine Frontier Regional School, quae fabula Graeca esset mihi acceptissima.
And then let me
Multae fabulae Graecae
go forward to where he's telling the story a little bit, because I think that's,
evila
yeah.
domini severissimi.
So this is Androcles leaving.
Patroclum quotidie verberabat.
Mhm.
Fugit. Et fugit ad speluncam, quam intravit. Post breve tempus autem, Leo quoque, Leo maximus et ferocissimus advenit. Et Androclus noster maxime timebat.
There. So I think you see it, like, it's tempting. I want to watch the rest, but it is so awesome. And he has such a great voice. And we also linked the original text, I think, in if people would be interested in that. But as Justin says in the video, we didn't hear that part. It's nice because it has a happy ending for once.
And I think what I like too is you can use this as a comparison contrast after the students finish reading Pastor et Leo. What did you notice in Justin's story that isn't in the Cambridge, vice versa? And which versions do you like? And I've often had my students illustrating these, and then they choose kind of best of lines for their illustrations, so little captions as they go through, and they tell their own story.
It's fun. And that's such an awesome mosaic. And then, oh, and here's where we actually have the link to a wonderful article on kind of how to write tiered text, because I use them all the time. But in the beginning, I was very like, oh, how do I do this? I don't know how to do this. And then after you do it a while, they just come very naturally. So there's that. And also, I always have to put in a plug because I use Keith Toda's activities all the time. He has all of these different active things you can do with whiteboards and other ways, and like those little Easter eggs. And there's a link in there, and there's a link at the end as well. But both of these could be really useful. Oh, and then we were thinking in terms of stage 15, connected to Aeneid 5. The boat races, when you read it, it's almost exactly the same. But then it's kind of fun to do the foot race and all the other things and hear about the different prizes that they get. And it's a book that they don't usually read in AP, certainly. So it's kind of nice to, and so many of them are into sports, right? So it's nice to get the track and field in there.
And Sears and Balestrini talk about in their article, you can either start with the original and strip away things, or you have an idea about the original and you just do kind of a plot summary. So you can do bottom up or top down as you're composing your own stories for the kids. And you're doing that so that they've got something to hold on to when they get to authentic literature.
And I mean, this is sort of tangential, but I've thought of having students also go back to earlier levels and make their own tiered readings out of a previous Cambridge story. I feel like that could be good practice of summarizing and paring it down. So that's something else they could do. That's more of a written thing, but okay.
Okay, so is he another Hercules? I love the connections to Plautus. Any opportunity that I get to make Plautine connections, I will do so. I'm actually in the middle of reading Rudens with a couple of students who just wanted to do it on their own, and they're going to be doing a puppet show version. I think this is lovely because you get Modestus, who thinks, who's definitely a braggart soldier. And one of the things that I do with Elevate's worksheet is they've got an adapted version of Miles Gloriosus by Plautus, and I just have the students swankify it, which means that I just have them put it in their own modern day. They can do a hip hop version or a country and western version or whatever, and they have a really good time with it. It's playful and they're engaging with the language, and that Elevate piece is such a nice entry into when you choose to do Plautus. And I really encourage you, there is more to life than just Virgil and Caesar. There's a whole host of wonderful Latin authors to read. Don't skip Plautus. He's a win-win.
And then thinking of that whole Quintus and Dumnorix friendship that's so short-lived. It really connects very nicely to the Pullo and Varenus, who and we have a clip somewhere maybe of on the next one.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful HBO, but of course you can't show that one at school. But at this point, what we were thinking, one thing you could do, here's the text, let's see if it shows up, is to do a word sweep. Like you can just give them the passage, fingers crossed. It's a lot of text right there. I might have broken it up, but you can sweep through. I often do this at a very basic level and just say, hey, what words do you recognize? And they realize they know a lot, and that can be very confidence building. And then you had a more thematic way of looking at it, Smith.
Yeah, I just have the students, once they say, I recognize these words, they list them. Either I have a scribe who writes things down on the board, or they type them up in a Google Doc. And then we try to make a prediction about what the passage is just from the words that they recognized. So they might see fortissimi viri, they see centuriones, they see controversias, they see pugnaretur. So automatically they know that there's some really brave or strong guys. They happen to be centurions. They've seen these words before. There's an argument. And so once Pullo and Varenus, their names show up, we're expecting something, some kind of tete-a-tete between them. And they're not wrong. And it's this brief moment that the students get, and they cling to it. And maybe that's what happened in the HBO series, that somebody was reading Caesar and they thought, I really like these guys, even though they get a fleeting mention in Caesar. And so they make the whole HBO series about them. If you,
and it's actually kind of a cool opportunity for students to reflect on friendship and how you can be competitive but still friends. And they could speculate, like maybe Quintus and Dumnorix were a little competitive too, who knows.
and then another extension you could do is you could bring in some Cicero and have him guide you on Amicitia if you wanted. So, or maybe a blast from the past with Caesar. So if you want to click on the HBO Rome and just cue it up to 1 minute, this fellow basically gives us are these two guys real? He's not entirely sure about his Latin, and I think that's okay. We want to be welcoming to all people who are interested in classical and antiquities, Greek and Roman culture. So once it does queue up, he tells you, like, this is where HBO starts. And yeah, so about 1 minute's good.
Be precise here. Okay.
Mark Antony and Augustus all feature heavily in the show, but interestingly, none of them are the main characters. That honor goes to a pair of Roman legionaries, Lucius Vorenus and Titus Pullo. Throughout the plot, these two play a part in some of the most important events of the era, and in many ways act like Mark Wahlberg's character in Patriots Day, always around when the action happens. It would be no surprise to most that for these guys to feature this heavily in Roman events, they must be made up story elements. And of course, that's mostly right. Lucius was never a senator, and Pullo never met Cleopatra. But believe it or not, these guys actually did exist in real life. Even more interesting, we know about them because of Julius Caesar himself, who wrote about them. His writings, of course, are not nearly as extravagant as the characters in the series. In this video, I'm going to look at historical accounts of Lucius and Titus, compare it with how they're portrayed in the series, and I'll be looking at what it gets right and wrong. So let's start with the
Place
version
to stop.
of
Stop here,
Vorenus
yeah.
and Titus Pullo.
And he references De Bella Gallico, and I think it's fun for students to see where that. I wouldn't encourage them to go watch HBO Rome. I don't want that falling back on my head, but I think the intro is wonderful, especially if you do happen to be teaching the Gallic Wars. And then if you click on Latinitium, you can hear someone reading it out loud, and the kind of energy that the spoken text brings forth. And I think one of the things that I really like about Cambridge is so much, you don't have to be a Jenny student, a Jenny Latin student to get Caesar. Cambridge does it, and does it so much more and more interestingly, I think, because it's not just this rote memorization or these stories that are disconnected and you have to memorize a bunch of Caesar vocabulary. Instead, you get people who are visiting the farthest parts of Britain, and you get all of the different military ranks, especially once you reach the third book. And I've never had students have any issue once they get to Caesar.
Is this the one?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Not hearing anything.
Just make sure you put it on loud.
On what?
Loud.
Okie dokie.
Erant in ea legione fortissimi viri, centuriones, qui primis ordinibus appropinquarent, Titus Pullo et Lucius Vorenus. Hi perpetuas inter se controversias habebant, qui nam anteferretur, omnibusque annis de locis summis simultatibus contendebant.
What I like about this is I would turn the captions off so that they can't.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
See it. No, that's it's fine. It's there, and I think it's also important for us, just like Magister Craft, that you have the option of turning off the English, turn on the Latin if you want. But what I like about this is it gives you a break from reading things out loud. It helps kids to hear pacing in reading. I have some students who, when they read aloud, they just read as if there's no attention to punctuation, punctuation that our editors have put in for them that the Romans didn't. And it would really help them if they had that opportunity. This is a great chance to take a look at Project Archaea. So if you're not familiar, Project Archaea has both Caesar and Virgil tiered readings and multiple tiered readings. So you'll have a tier 2, a tier 3, a tier 4. The tier 2 are the easiest and the tier 4 is the unadapted. And you can choose to go in whatever way, but I think if you start off with a tier 2, your students very quickly and readily get, here's what's happening in the story. And then they jump into the unadapted piece with 0 issue. So that with like all the Cambridge Unit 3 and Caesar is a super easy text for them to navigate. So another plug for Petronius, because I love Petronius and he shows up a couple of times in our book. And in stage 32, the bottom text is my pictograph of unadapted Petronius, the Trimalchio's dinner. And I tried to link it on a Google Doc, and Google Docs just don't like all of the pictures. So if you're interested in it, I'm happy to send it to you as a PDF, and that way it will be safe and not, I don't know, it basically has my vocab entries and then a blank space in Google Docs, which isn't very helpful. And on the top, I have taken Trimalchio's dinner and I've just modified it so it's super easy for students to read before they dive into Petronius. And I've done the illustrations. I often have students do illustrations for them. So I think it nice back and forth. It's like, look, I'm going to draw something for you. You draw something so that it makes sense. And it's the toothpick scene, the silver toothpick, because you definitely need a silver toothpick to clean your teeth. And Peterson has a little biography of Petronius. It's entirely in Latin. You can put it into an ed puzzle if you want. You can click on it.
Let's click on it quickly, yeah, because it's so great. I actually played it for my Latin 4s, and they, we're not going to watch the whole 10 minutes, but they were raptly listening for the whole 10 minutes and with no subtitles at all. Oh dear, which one do I want? Do I want the video in Latin, do you think?
You want the video in Latin, yeah.
Right, here we go. He's so charming.
Hodie de Petronio sermuerit.
And it's kind of cool, like he's in a
Discetis
park
quis
in
fuerit,
Sweden.
quem admodum sibi mortem inter epulas consciverit, et cur purissimae impuritatis auctor satissaepe vocatus sit.
Okay, and then, so you can see how it goes. And so but they were fascinated to learn about Petronius, and it made reading the story, they were much more obviously engaged with it, right? Okay.
Oh, okay. So does love really conquer all things? Who knows if it's Dido or Domitia? And Cambridge has this pantomime of Mars and Venus. They have a reference to the pantomiming Paris with Mars and Venus, a story. So I just did a quick little screenshot, which is in Elevate. My students love this story, love thinking about how it connects to the dying Dido, or how Domitia and Domitian's relationship is not so successful. And if you want a little bit more about the raging Dido, Magister Kraft has come to your rescue. So he's taken, if you queue it up, if you click on the link and queue it up to about 145, the first part is adapted, and then the second part is unadapted Virgil. So at about 145, he has illustrated it for you in Minecraft visuals, and then he reads Virgil aloud. I think half of,
You said 145, right?
145. I think half of my life is just sitting and waiting for things to queue up.
Okay, 144 is pretty close.
Yeah, that's great.
Dude. the kids love this because they do Minecraft and they're like, oh my gosh, that took forever.
Felix fatis exterita dido, morte ora. Taidet caeli convexat veri. Quo magis inceptum per agatrucemque relinquat, vidit, tu recremis cum donem ponere daris, horrendum dictu, latiges nigrescere sacros. Fusa qui nobscenum se vertere vina cruorem. Hoc visum nulli non ipse fata sorori. Praeterea fuit intectis de marbore templum
Okay.
conjugis antiqui.
It's hard not to.
I know, we want to watch all of
I
it,
want to see it.
but it's 3 minutes of your time in class, and it's unadapted. You get the adapted and then the unadapted versions, and wonderful connections. So I often will introduce little pieces of Virgil at stage 33 and 34 because I think it's a perfect time to do so.
Okay. Oh, great. And then we get to stage 35, which I love, because there's so much to unpack there. There's all the stuff about Pliny's Laurentine Villa, which, you know, like this year I had them read the whole letter in English and then do some bits in Latin in addition to the chapter. And it just made it so much more interesting. So I'm actually going to click on this first, just to super quickly show you. We have a link of this. There was this person, this architect, who made a reconstruction of it, and you can click on it and look closely. There's an side cut elevation, but the cool thing is that this architect decided to take that and create it as a university community center. So he molded it into the modern day and based it on Pliny, and I just think that's so cool. And so there's a nice CAD drawing for students who are into architecture. It's just really neat. I love this reconstruction.
And another, I was just going to say, it's another plug for how inextricably linked language and culture are.
Yes, true. And then of course, it's the perfect time for that Horace City Mouse, Country Mouse. So I made a very quick tiered reading for this. And what I did was, because we didn't have that much time, right? And part of it is sometimes it's easy to not do this because you are running out of time. So you can pick just a little bit. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. Is it going to run? So honestly, I just gave them the English. I made a Google Doc with pictures and we read through the English of most of it. The mouse goes to the city. But then the last three I turned into a bit of a tiered reading, the part where the dogs come in, right? And let's see if we can start. And so this one, and I won't make it go full screen because who knows what will happen, but you can talk about all sorts of things like coupons, and that calls to mind the lying down on the table. Mutata fortuna, they would know, subito, all these words they would know. Maybe not, yeah, that is the plural of mouse. Okay. And then, because I like dogs, you have to get the Molossian in there. And then there's always a conversation about dogs and people's dogs. And somebody had, a Pyrenees. And then you've got all sorts of opus est mihi and tutus in cities, words that are good for them to know in the future. And they get very engaged in it because it's the exciting part. So I think there was one more now. I think that's it. The mouse is just there. So that's a very quick thing that will get their attention and get them into the story and thinking about it in a way that they might not have otherwise. And that takes us back to stage 18.
Okay. I wanted to end with this, not because 18 is a proper place to end, but because I think anytime you can sing with your students, it's a proper place to end.
Yes.
And I used to do these ridiculous spring festivals where one of the parents said, we're just coming for the spring festival to hear the Latin students singing. And I didn't know if it was a compliment. I mean, it was really ridiculous, but I had some students one year, we did this, we did In Taberno Quando Sumus. Students had just started reading it and I thought, oh, this has nothing and everything to do with Karl Orff. And I would just get the sillies out of them by singing this. And I had students who were incredible beatboxers. So if you'll click on the link, if you don't know what a beatboxer is, it's like, what I can't even do it, but they were phenomenal. And they loved this particular version. And they all got up in front of the entire student body with parents in the spring for their performance in togas and beatboxed into Berna Quando Sumos, and loved it. So if it decides to come.
It's coming. You know,
Somewhere in Europe in the 13th century, very Star Wars-esque. If it doesn't work,
it's not going. Oh, there we go.
I think it's just a little laggy, but it's a really,
Too loud.
no, it's just laggy. So we're not getting any of the music, but I think that's okay. The link is here for you for when you're ready, and we've got a host.
Okay, sorry, should I stop there?
Yeah, you should. I think
Thank
just
you.
stop it is fine. But it's a really fun, wild and woolly version of In Taberna Quando Sum. It is not dry, and the students would immediately start dancing once they heard it. And again, like you take a couple of minutes at the very beginning of your period, they get the crazies out, and then they're focused. And they all they all beboomed sine meta. So
oh, and that's all of our links.
yeah, so if you need anything, and the one that we didn't, if you just want to click on the Cambridge Unadapted because we
Oh,
didn't
yes.
show it. So if you're not familiar with this, this is, I think this is the 4th edition, but it's still, I think, super helpful to see where the majority of the stories connect to unadapted pieces of literature. And it goes all the way through unit 1, 2, 3, 4.
The Vindolanda tablets. I just had a student do an IA.
We also have the 5th edition on the NACCP website, cambridgelatin.org. It's been updated for the 5th edition.
Thank you. We'll update it too then.
Okay. Oh, thank you, ladies. Thank you both so much. So many wonderful resources and terrific ideas. Thank you. Do any of our participants have any questions that they would like to ask before we let them go this evening?
Did you share the Google link?
Which,
I'll do that right now.
Because all those links you want them to be able to click on, they need to actually have the
yeah,
document, right?
we can share it in the chat, right?
Yep, I just did.
Yay.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
I have a question for you. When you're doing something like this, how do you fit this in and move forward with your stages? I mean, are these little activities, or do they like stop the work and do this, you know? 'Cause I think some teachers would think like, wow, this is phenomenal, but it's hard to fit it in. I know, I shouldn't say I think.
So if you have a lot of time to kill, you can stretch it out if you want, but I never have a lot of time to kill. So I often use things as just a dive into, and then let's move on, a dive in and let's move on, a dive in and let's move on. Because I want to keep the pace rolling always.
Okay.
So that's why things like the inscriptions, that's very short. Even a quick tiered reading can be like a 3-minute thing. But it's good to start, like if you start class with that, as Smith said, like they're hooked and they're making the connection.
And I think you're probably making teachers feel better when they hear this, because the fear is always that it's bringing in more for me to figure out. But if you're saying these are tiny little activities and they really help you with your classroom management, that's great.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, keep it short. What is it? Keep it simple, Suetonius.
That's right.
And then obviously, when you introduce so many of these at the very beginning of the lesson, that's really the hook that keeps them engaged for the whole class period. Well, thank you once again, ladies, and we will have this posted in a few days on the NACCP website, cambridgelatin.org. And if any of you need a certificate, please email us at training@cambridgelatin.org. And thank you so much for attending. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.